Eala just shattered what everyone thought was impossible, a WTA record that stood untouched for 17 years. But nobody saw it coming this way. The tennis world is spiraling, rivals are stunned, social media is melting down. What she did in that single moment didn't just rewrite history, it exposed something raw about hunger, pain, and the price of greatness. This is the breakthrough that changed everything. For nearly 2 decades, one name echoed through women's tennis with an almost mythical weight. The record stood untouched, a mark so formidable that even the sport's elite whispered about it with reverence rather than ambition. 17 years of silence, 17 years of players trying, failing, and eventually accepting that some achievements belonged to history alone. Venus Williams had said it, not the flashy record everyone discussed at dinner tables, but the one that separates champions from icons, the standard that defined a generation. Young players would study footage of her runs, analyze her serve patterns, dissect her mental fortitude, all knowing, deep down, that replicating her trajectory was statistical fantasy. Coaches would shake their heads. It's possible, they'd say, but not likely in your lifetime. Then Eala emerged from the Philippines with a hunger that made older players uncomfortable. Not arrogant, not reckless, just different. Hungry in a way that suggested she hadn't received the memo about impossibility. While other rising stars were building brands and cultivating social media empires, Eala was grinding, practicing in obscurity, winning tournaments nobody broadcast, losing matches that didn't matter, learning from every defeat like it was scripture. The tennis establishment watched her trajectory with cautious interest. She had talent, raw, undeniable talent. But talent alone doesn't break 17-year-old records held by a legend. Talent alone doesn't rewrite the conversation. There's something else required, something ineffable, something you can't teach. By 2024, whispers about Eala had shifted. She wasn't just another prospect anymore. She was becoming inevitable. But destiny doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, then detonates. The tournament seemed ordinary on paper, another WTA event on the calendar, another draw with familiar names competing for points and paychecks. Nobody circled this particular week as historic. No documentaries would be made, no think pieces written beforehand. It was just tennis, gloriously, brutally, beautiful tennis. Then Eala walked onto that court. Her opponent was formidable, a player ranked decisively higher, a veteran with multiple titles on her resume and confidence earned through years of victory. The matchup looked inevitable on paper. The odds reflected it. Sportsbooks had her as heavy favorite. Analysts predicted a straightforward result. Even Eala's own camp seemed resigned to the underdog narrative. But something was different that day, something crackling through the air like electricity before a storm. Eala's serve had teeth. Her movement was explosive. More than that, her eyes betrayed a clarity that transcended typical tournament tennis. This wasn't just another match. This was the one, the catalyst, the moment. The rallies were devastating, brutal exchanges that left spectators breathless. Eala didn't just compete, she suffocated her opponent with relentless precision. Every serve painted lines with surgical accuracy. Every forehand carried intention. Every backhand screamed defiance. The crowd sensed it immediately. The energy shifted. Commentators stopped following the script and started witnessing something genuine. Set 1 collapsed in Eala's favor. Set 2 followed the same trajectory. Her opponent was excellent, truly excellent, but confronted with something she couldn't quantify or counter. Eala had crossed a threshold. She'd stepped through some invisible barrier separating good players from transcendent ones. The scoreline eventually reflected what everyone watching had already understood. Eala wasn't just winning, she was announcing. What happened next would send shockwaves through every corner of professional tennis. The record fell not with dramatic fanfare, but with stunning clarity. Eala reached the statistic, the number that had defined excellence for nearly 2 decades, and kept accelerating. She didn't pause, didn't celebrate prematurely. She crossed it and continued executing at the same devastating pace. 17 years. Gone. The instant registered across social media like an earthquake. Verified accounts, casual fans, opposing players in locker rooms. Everyone received the news simultaneously, and the reaction was unanimous disbelief, followed by grudging admiration. This wasn't supposed to happen this way, not this fast, not this completely. Eala had shattered the record by such a margin that the achievement transcended mere statistical accomplishment. It became a statement, a declaration that the hierarchy of women's tennis had shifted fundamentally, that a new force had arrived, that nobody's legacy was secure. The commentators struggled to articulate what they'd witnessed. Words felt inadequate. Historic sounded hollow. Remarkable undersold the magnitude. There simply weren't sufficient superlatives in the English language to capture what Eala had accomplished. She'd done the theoretically impossible, then done it with such overwhelming supremacy that debate seemed futile. Her post-match interview revealed something equally significant. No arrogance, no hollow predictions, just gratitude mixed with determination. "I came here to fight," Eala said, her voice steady despite the enormity of the moment. "I never thought about the record. I just wanted to prove something to myself." Those words would echo through countless analysis videos, replayed endlessly because they captured the essence of what made her achievement transcendent. The footage circulated globally. Every tennis channel, every sports network, every social media platform. The numbers climbed exponentially. 50 million views within hours, then 100 million. Eala's name wasn't just trending, it was occupying multiple trending positions simultaneously. But greatness doesn't arrive without controversy attached. Rivals erupted with carefully worded statements that barely concealed their genuine shock. Players who'd previously dismissed Eala as promising but unproven suddenly confronted an undeniable reality. She wasn't unproven anymore. She'd proven herself beyond any reasonable interpretation. The media fractured into two distinct camps immediately. One celebrated Eala's breakthrough with unbridled enthusiasm. She represented something fresh, something revolutionary, a new generation claiming dominance. The narrative was compelling, and it sold advertisements. The other camp wasn't hostile exactly, but skeptical. They questioned the tournament strength, the draw luck, whether the singular achievement actually indicated sustained dominance or merely a fortunate convergence of circumstances. These critiques weren't irrational. They were the measured responses of people trained to analyze sports objectively. But they couldn't suppress the underlying reality that Eala had achieved something extraordinary. Social media revealed the true reaction, unfiltered, passionate. Tennis fans from around the globe engaged in the most authentic debate possible. Some hailed Eala as the future. Others suggested caution. Nobody remained indifferent. That was the real measure of significance. The tennis establishment faced an unexpected problem. Eala had just fundamentally altered the conversation about women's tennis trajectory. She'd provided proof. Undeniable, statistical proof that the sport's competitive landscape had transformed. The veterans who dominated for years suddenly seemed vulnerable. The younger generation suddenly seemed closer. The entire pyramid structure of professional tennis had shifted beneath everyone's feet. Coaches analyzing match footage with their players had to confront uncomfortable truths. Their strategies had limitations. Their preparation methods required evolution. The template Eala had exposed through her performance wasn't complicated. It was just executed at a level of perfection that demanded everyone else elevate proportionally. The question wasn't whether Eala could compete at the highest level anymore. The record Eala broke represented more than raw statistical achievement. It symbolized the barrier between generational dominance and fleeting success. It meant that Eala had reached a threshold where her name belonged in conversations with the sport's greatest competitors. Not someday, not eventually, now. This specific record had significance because it measured sustained excellence across an extended period. It wasn't a single victory, it wasn't a tournament championship. It was the cumulative proof of relentless competence across multiple competitions against varied opponents under diverse conditions. Breaking it meant Eala had demonstrated the capacity to perform at an exceptionally high level consistently. The implications cascaded outward rapidly. Sponsors suddenly showed renewed interest. Media outlets that had covered her casually began assigning dedicated reporters. Young players training around the globe recognized her as a legitimate blueprint for success. She wasn't an anomaly anymore. She was a template. More significantly, Eala's achievement forced the tennis world to recalibrate expectations. If she could break a record held by a legend, then the sport itself was evolving. Racket technology had improved, training methods had become more sophisticated, physical conditioning had advanced exponentially. Eala hadn't just beaten the record, she'd proven that the collective elevation of women's tennis had reached a point where previous standards required updating. Her competitors faced a psychological adjustment. Respect had always existed, you don't achieve ranking without talent and dedication, but now that respect had crystallized into something sharper, something more urgent. They recognized in Eala a competitor who operated at a different frequency. Her consistency wasn't luck, her execution wasn't circumstance. It was the product of uncompromising commitment to excellence. This single achievement would reshape how sponsors viewed investment in women's tennis. The fundamental question now wasn't whether Eala could compete at the highest level. She'd proven that, beyond argument. The question evolved into something more complex. Would she sustain it? Would this achievement prove to be her pinnacle, or merely the opening chapter of a longer narrative? History demonstrates that breaking one record doesn't guarantee sustained excellence. Players have erupted magnificently, then faded when the pressure mounted, when rivals adapted, when the weight of expectation became unbearable. Would Eala transcend that pattern, or would she join the roster of brilliant performers who burn brightly before dimming? The tennis world divided on this question. Optimists saw Eala as fundamentally different, as possessing the mental resilience and physical talent to sustain dominance across years. Skeptics suggested caution, recommending that we wait before canonizing her as a generational talent. Both perspectives held legitimacy. What remained undeniable was that the sport had changed. Eala's achievement had shifted the entire conversation about women's tennis trajectory. Sponsors suddenly invested differently. Young players trained with renewed urgency. Media coverage intensified. The record books had been rewritten, and everyone understood that the margin for error in professional tennis had shrunk. The 27-year-old defending champion watched Eala's performance and probably felt the first genuine chill of vulnerability. The 31-year-old veteran wondered if her window had finally closed. The 18-year-old prospect watched and thought, that's possible. I could do that too. The entire ecosystem reorganized itself around the reality that Eala announced. Whether she becomes the greatest of her generation or merely an extraordinarily accomplished player remains unclear. What's certain is that she's already guaranteed herself a place in tennis history. She's already changed the conversation. She's already inspired and terrified in equal measure. That alone constitutes a legacy. The real question isn't what comes next for Alex Eala. It's what happens to women's tennis now that she's proven the impossible is simply the improbable with proper commitment. Alex Eala didn't just break a record. She fractured the ceiling that had constrained women's tennis ambition for 17 years. She proved that legends are untouchable, that history isn't permanent, that greatness, true, undeniable greatness, arrives unexpectedly but irreversibly. The tennis world will never quite be the same. The conversation has shifted. The expectations have elevated. The possibilities have expanded. This is the moment historians will point to when they discuss the evolution of women's professional tennis. This is the achievement that inspired thousands of young players to train harder. This is the breakthrough that reminded everyone why sports matter, because they reveal human potential at its absolute zenith. The story doesn't end here, it's only beginning. And honestly, we're all just witnessing the opening chapter of something far bigger than any record. If you believe Eala will dominate women's tennis for the next decade, drop a comment below. Share your prediction. Let's discuss what comes next for the player who just shattered history. And please, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the moments that reshape sports forever. Because greatness, it doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, then detonates.